Howard, Price Realtors, and I am here with Misty Whitman and Samantha Smith, and they are attorneys at Citron and Whitman in Thomasville, and we are here to talk about getting our house in order and the possibility and how to arrange for long-term care. It's not our favorite subject. Most people don't want to talk about that, but it is a thing that happens a lot of times with people, and sometimes it's a short-term thing that happens. Sometimes it's a long-term event, but let's talk about how to get there and how to get out, or what can we talk about to help people get ready for that?
So long-term care planning is extremely important, no matter what your wishes are. So I always tell folks, I never met anyone that intended to be in a nursing home. When I go out and meet them and talk to them, no one ever planned to be there. So we can lay the best plans, but sometimes life has different things in mind for us, and we end up, unfortunately, in these situations. But what we want to make sure is that with some simple planning, that you still have your results and your outcomes what you want them to be. And so folks frequently, if they will start in their 50s and early 60s planning for these things, it can really be beneficial, and even earlier if you have some major health issues. But it really starts, once you get your kids out, you get your kids off to college and established, you really need to start having some conversations about what do we want the rest of our life to look like? What does best case scenario look like for us? And so we plan for best case scenario, but we put in the contingencies for those unexpected events. And so it's really figuring out, do I want to remain in my home? Do I want to go and do what I call the college lifestyle in retirement, where I live in an assisted living or retirement community and have all the fun things that you could do in college, just at a different level? And people's mindsets are changing a lot about retirement communities, and they're starting to think of them more in that way, that this really is a great community with like-minded people that enjoy similar activities. So that's becoming more important for some people, but then there's still some people that are absolutely adamant that they want to remain in their home until the very end. So our job is to make sure that whatever your wishes are, that those can happen if at all possible. And so we meet with folks and we go over, how can we plan for this? What are your goals? And then we look at their financial picture. And so this is something that you can sit down and you can do with an attorney, and they can work with you and help you devise a plan to make sure that your assets provide for you in the way in which you want to spend the rest of your life. And a lot of folks really have a desire to leave something for their children. They worked really hard their entire lives, and they really want to share that with their kids or their grandkids. And so a lot of times we hear the overwhelming fear of, I don't want everything to go to the government. I don't want the state to get it all. That's what they say to us. And what that really means is that they're hoping, if they do end up in a nursing facility, that there's a way that some of their assets can be preserved for their loved ones. And fortunately, with planning, they can. And that's where, if you sit down and you make these arrangements in advance, there are ways that we can do things that you're not spending a lot of money up front. It's very cost effective to do these things, but it lays them out in such ways that they're not countable assets in the terms of the long-term care world. So that if you did end up going into a facility, that you would still be able to get assistance paying for that nursing care and not have all of your assets have to be sold to pay for that. And that's really a goal of a lot of folks that I meet with, and I'm sure it is for you too, Sam.
Yes. Yeah.
And so a lot of times it's just about changing the character of those assets. And what we find a lot of times with people as they're getting older, baby boomers especially, is they don't want to give up control. They see it as a control thing. Well, I'm in charge of my things. And that's true. You are. You're in charge of your things. But one of the most responsible things you can do is set things up in place so that when the time comes and you can't act on your behalf or something happens, you have put those things in place. You have exerted your control to make sure these things take place the way they should. Hey, Bear. And one of the things that you can do, a lot of times people will be hesitant to do things like put power of attorney in place. You can put a power of attorney in place and you can do that in a way that it can't be utilized right away. And so you can wait until the time comes, but you've got the documents in place that will be there whenever the time does come.
If you do a power of attorney, does it go into effect immediately against your will? Do you have to be in a place where you can't make decisions for yourself when it is effective?
So not necessarily.
Okay.
So under 32C, which is the North Carolina general statute that has to do with power of attorneys, if you execute a basic durable power of attorney, it's effective immediately, but it's fully revocable. And the person that you appoint as your agent has a fiduciary duty to act in your best interest. Now, from a practical standpoint, a lot of times financial institutions and real estate, it has to be recorded at the Register of Deeds before it can be utilized for those things. But to sign contracts and other things, once it's executed, it is effective and it doesn't have to be recorded. But a lot of times we keep the original power of attorney in our vault at our office for the client in safekeeping. And the only person that has access to that is the client. And the client will give me the directive of, if something happens to me, I'm gonna have my children contact you to tell you, and at that point you can record it and give them copies. So then they can use it. What happens when those kids contact me, I'm gonna verify that in fact something has happened to mom and dad and make sure. I'll never forget, I had a young son in his 20s called me one time and told me that his mother had suffered from a terrible accident, that she was in a facility and she was not doing well, and he needed the power of attorney recorded so he could access funds to pay her bills. I said, okay, I'm so sorry to hear that. What facility? He stammered. Long story short, mom was fine. She was on vacation. He just wanted some money. So we checked to make sure. And of course, when mom got back, she revoked the power of attorney and appointed someone else. And we have that in our vault in safekeeping for the future. So there are things that you can do to put in place to make sure that people don't act when they're not supposed to. And there's ways that you can safekeep that. Anything else you can think of, Sam, about long-term care planning?
I think the biggest thing is just to never think that it's too soon to be thinking long-term. And that a lot of times, things that could be avoided down the road, had you explored that a little bit sooner, some of those things can be avoided. But I think absent that, that's all I can think of. That
You are spot on. The earlier that you think about these things, the better. That doesn't mean that if your mom or dad or your spouse goes into a facility that all hope's lost. There are things that we can do, especially when it's a spouse going in, that we can preserve most all of the assets. So always, it's worth your wait to have a good attorney that does estate planning and long-term care planning on standby, and it's better to have the relationship established, because if it's one of our existing clients and this emergency happens, we're going to drop what we can to help them immediately. But if it's someone we've never met, it's going to be harder for us to make arrangements to do those things, especially last minute. So it is very well worth your time, and it's, again, one of the best gifts you can give to your kids to sit down and have this planning appointment. And we tell people it's an ongoing process. You need to review your documents every year. In the back of your mind, you may be thinking, well, I did this 10 years ago, I'm good. Well, laws change, your situations change, kids get married, divorced, grandkids are born, so you need to update these things. So I always tell everybody, every year when you do your taxes, or if you don't have to file taxes every year when open enrollment for Medicare happens, you review your documents and say, okay, I'm just gonna call or email my attorney and make sure there's nothing else I need to do. And I'm gonna ask you a few questions, and based on your answers, I'll say, no, you're good, or yeah, you need to come in and let's talk about this. So it's an ongoing thing that you will update as you go, and it's a living, breathing thing. Just like your circumstances change, you need to adapt your documents to go with it. But getting those basics in place and establishing that relationship can save you thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in the future and make sure your goals are accomplished.
And again, peace of mind.
Peace of mind. Be active in the growing older stage. Don't be complacent, be active, and if you're active in it, you can control it.
People like that.
Mhm.
Great information. Thank you guys so much for coming and giving us the tips about all the legal aspects of getting our houses in order is such a good idea. So baby boomers, along with me, let's get all this stuff in order so that our kids don't have to worry about it.
And remember, at Citron and Whitman, we're always here to help.
Okay? We'll put their number on the screen so you can call them. Thank you.